Hey everyone, Beardo here with actually a pretty sizable haul to go over with you guys today. We're going to go over the majority of Judd Winick's run on Batman, which was kind of controversial at the time, but it was one that I actually really enjoyed. I think a lot of great things have come out of what Judd Winick brought to Batman during this time period, and I'm really excited to share with you what he brought to the table with Batman. Now, after War Games wrapped up, basically you had Batman's War Games protocol sort of leaving Gotham's underworld in shambles, and what basically happens is Black Mask swoops in and scoops everything up. After Doug Moench's couple of runs on Batman where he introduced Black Mask and Black Mask would make a play for Gotham's underworld, he never had as complete of control of the underworld as he does in Judd Winick's run. However, Judd Winick's Black Mask is a very different character indeed. He is very much a psychotic, has this really black sense of humor, and just really maniacal character. Really kind of a lot more fun than, ironically, Doug Moench's take on the character, and of course Doug Moench created the character, but I do really enjoy Judd Winick's iteration of him a lot better. However, there is another player on the scene at this time, which we see introduced here in 635, and that is, of course, the Red Hood. And now, this particular illustration by Matt Wagner here on the cover is a lot of fun. It harkens back to the old Red Hood, in which, if you think of like the Killing Joke and Alan Moore's take, where basically he's paying homage to older Batman ideas that the Joker used to be this Red Hood gangster, and then eventually he was, fell in a vat of acid, yada yada yada, became the Joker. He always dressed very much like this when he was Red Hood. Now, when Judd Winick took on the Red Hood, he actually looks nothing like this and probably shouldn't be on the cover here. Instead, he has sort of a shell mask, no cape, and he kind of wears kind of like a BMX biker outfit, or like a U-boat commander outfit, or something like that. It's just sort of like the leather jacket and the black pants kind of a look. And the big thing that Red Hood is bringing to the table is he is very much in direct opposition to Black Mask. He is someone that is sort of making a play for Gotham's underworld on his own, but at the same time he has a very separate agenda to Black Mask, and he's very much just a rabble-rouser. He's someone that is inducing chaos among Gotham's underworld, and you can tell, again, his agenda is very different than Black Mask. And just since we're looking at the cover here, you can see the difference in Black Mask just by the way he's illustrated and the way he's designed here for this run on Batman, compared with the old run where he sort of almost looked like evil Dick Tracy, or like a strange Dick Tracy villain, something like that. And basically what happens is you get Red Hood and Black Mask going at it with each other throughout all of Gotham City, creating all kinds of ruckus. Black Mask is bringing kryptonite into the city. He brings Amazo into the city, which we have a big confrontation there. And Batman and Nightwing are basically caught up in the middle of it. Nightwing does figure very strongly into this arc because of some of the things that are coming up, and for reasons that will be apparent when you see who is actually behind the Red Hood. Now, even though this cover shows Batman seeing it and seeing who is underneath the hood, we don't actually find that out, or Batman, I should say, doesn't actually find that out in this particular issue. He doesn't find it out until a few issues beyond this, but the readers find out on the last page of this issue that the man beneath the mask is none other than Jason Todd. And of course that is the reason why this series is so controversial, because of course you're bringing back this character that was never supposed to have been brought back. Of course when comic book companies do this, it's always controversial. 9 times out of 10, it more or less works out, and Jason Todd has become such a huge part of the Batman universe as it is today, and especially his persona as Red Hood has become such a major part that it's hard to imagine Batman without having that Red Hood and the Outlaws title, for example, in the DC New 52, at least in my opinion. Now, around this time, Batman is starting to get suspicious. There are all kinds of signs that maybe Jason Todd is back, and even though he hasn't had this, oh crap, you're back moment, he is starting to research, characters who have come back from the dead. And over the next couple of issues, you get him meeting with Green Arrow, you get him meeting with Superman, and just sort of exploring the idea of sort of reincarnation or whatever in the DCU. Of course, Batman has its own method of bringing people back from the dead, which is the Lazarus Pit, and that's something that he's really fixated on during this time period of, are there any Lazarus Pits that Jason Todd could have come back in? And then finally, in issue 641, you finally get the big reveal for Batman himself, who is actually underneath the Red Hood. Now, one thing I should point out is this is exactly, obviously, what the Red Hood looks like, and one of his, almost as iconic as his hood itself, is this curved knife that he uses throughout this whole arc. Early on, he always had this knife with him. It really, signified him as a villain. Nowadays, he's much more of an anti-hero, but this knife just really brought out sort of the psychosis of Jason Todd. He's really mellowed out a lot over the years since August 2005 when he popped up in here in Batman. I remember he made a jump after he left Batman. He sort of made a jump over into the Nightwing title, and his arrival was signified on the cover by Nightwing just sort of up in the background, and then just this big knife in the corner, and you knew Jason Todd was in New York after Nightwing. Didn't have to say anything else there. Now, as things continue to heat up, basically you have Black Mask trying to recruit people. He brings in Killer Croc. At one point he brings in Mr. Freeze, and things are really starting to heat up in the underworld, and the war between Red Hood and Black Mask is really building up, with Batman, of course, caught in the middle of this emotional roller coaster of finally knowing that Jason Todd is back. Now, in the midst of that, we did get a little bit of a break from the normal arc that Judd Winick was working on, and we do have a follow-up to War Games, and I actually almost showed these issues with War Games, but I want to make sure we continue in sequential order, so I'm showing them now. And basically, the big revelation in this is that Leslie Thompkins, excuse me, at the end of actually 644, Leslie Thompkins is revealed to have purposely let Stephanie Brown die. Now, as I mentioned when we talked about War Games, the death of Stephanie Brown hasn't had a whole lot of repercussions, and the big repercussion that happened with it, really for me, was the fact that Leslie Thompkins sort of let her die at the end of War Games, and that revelation here in 644. And as much of a revelation as it is, it's not a good revelation, in my opinion. As a matter of fact, it's one of the biggest missteps that DC made in the 2000s, because you set up this really complicated character of Leslie Thompkins, and you see her in this whole new light, but unfortunately it's never developed, it's never followed through on, and really it just sort of makes her distant from the Bat characters, and eventually she sort of makes her way back, but not on any real meaningful level, and so really her choice to let Stephanie Brown die is just sort of makes her demonized, and just sort of basically abandons the character, and why you would do that with the character is beyond me. In my opinion, that dynamic should have made for a lot of interesting stories, but of course we're worrying about Jason Todd right now. We're not worrying about Leslie Thompkins, and that decision that Bill Willingham made in War Crimes here really just got completely left by the wayside, almost as poorly as the handling of Stephanie Brown's death. Now, after 644 and the brief interlude with War Crimes, we do get kind of a flashback episode here in 645, where we kind of reestablish who Jason Todd was as Robin. We get kind of a retelling of his origin a little bit, and you really start to feel the dynamism of the character as he is sort of caught in this sort of inevitable destiny of kind of becoming a villain. And that is the big sort of background setup before we get to the final push, where the war really goes over the top. I just noticed this image of Black Mask here, just like flying through there. It's really silly. But anyway, you have sort of the big three-way battle between Black Mask and Red Hood and Batman getting underway. It causes for, of course, the unlikely allyship of Red Hood and Batman briefly, before it really comes down to just being Red Hood versus Batman. Now, as this thing comes to a head, of course, the Joker has to come into it, and you have actually way back in it would have been this issue here, 641, you have Red Hood kidnapping Joker and beating him with a crowbar. Of course, very ironic callback to Death in the Family there. Now, at the end of this, you have the big climax in 650, and this is, for me, is really the big misstep in this whole arc, because you did have a really strong emotional build-up. This was very personal. You were very invested in it, and of course this is right at the time that Infinite Crisis hit. So even though you have sort of this big confrontation at the end, everything sort of gets abruptly halted and sort of overridden by Infinite Crisis, and at the very last page of this is actually an Infinite Crisis moment where you see all these different Batmans in a row kind of crying out in terror because all these different timelines are, you know, coming into one, kind of 0 Hour style here, and all of this is basically getting kind of not necessarily wiped clean, but sort of pushed under the rug for the next big Batman story, which is going to take place with 1 year later. Now, 1 year later is a video for another day. I'm already running long, so thank you for watching, and I will see you all back tomorrow with 1 year later. Bye-bye.